Hey guys, welcome to the video. I'm Digmbot for Sanitarium.FM, and I'm here with Tyler from Random Seed Games, and they're making Lacuna Passage. And I gotta say, I'm usually pretty good with Kickstarter stuff, and this one flew under the radar for me. Like when Lone Samurai showed me this game, I went, "You give me that key right now because I want to stream this."
Yeah. We've had a Kickstarter a few years ago now, and since then we've kind of changed gears a little bit and gone more towards a survival sandbox mode, but we're still working on the story mode that we promised in our Kickstarter. So
that was one thing that I found really interesting. So let's kind of talk about what Lacuna Passage is for everybody, because I think one thing that people do these days is they go, "Oh, another survival game," because it's Rust and Ark and Conan, and it's just a little bit of. I think people are kind of overwhelmed with it, but you guys have a story mode, and I have to say your survival mode is unlike anything I've ever played. So, what kind of was the impetus to set it on Mars? Because it is on Mars, and it's kind of a hard science, not a sci-fi kind of thing.
Sure, yeah. I mean, I can give you the basic pitch. So Lacuna Passage, it started out as a project that I was inspired to do by the landing of the Curiosity rover on Mars. When my wife and I were sitting on the couch watching the first few images getting beamed back to Earth, all I could think about was how badly I wished I could be at the controls of that rover and pointing it in whatever direction I wanted to, taking photos of whatever I wanted to. And I figured, the closest I'd ever get to doing anything like that would probably be if I made a game about it. And so I set off working on some prototypes, and around that time is when the book The Martian came out. And obviously I've been influenced by all kinds of science fiction in the past, 2001: A Space Odyssey and everything. But The Martian, when that hit, it really felt like, okay, this is the kind of game idea that I want to push with. So yeah, I set forth with a few of my friends to really flesh it out and get prepared for a Kickstarter. But I wanted to put a game player in the shoes of an astronaut like Mark Watney, who's dealing with all kinds of real problems that a true astronaut would experience on one of the first manned missions to Mars. That
is one of the things that's so appealing to me about it. And actually, one of the first comments that popped up in chat when I was streaming it was, "Are you playing The Martian, the video game?"
Yeah.
And, in a lot of ways you really are. One thing I appreciate is, because I'm a huge science, like space junkie, and also sci-fi, I play a ton of Elite Dangerous.
Sure.
And I've always enjoyed an Elite getting down on the planet's surfaces and driving around, but this is more unique and kind of special in a way in Lacuna Passage because, Elite it uses a really realistic rendering engine, but it is procedural. This is actually made with satellite imagery from the Mars missions.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah, we from the very beginning I knew that this was a pretty daunting project for a small team, and honestly, I'm really the only full-time developer on the project, so recreating something as intricate as the surface of Mars is difficult for a single artist or developer. But when I started looking into, okay, I mean, what resources are there that I could tap into to make this as realistic as possible? And that's when I discovered the HiRise 3D scanning project for Mars. So there's these satellites that take high-resolution 3D scans of the planet's surface, and that information is freely available. You can go in and download all kinds of different data. And so I had someone who's actually involved in the aerospace industry help me convert those images into a format that I could apply as terrain height maps in the game. And so I basically have stitched together a bunch of my favorite landmarks and features from the various HiRise scans.
It really is a stunning landscape. I stood around for a while depleting my oxygen battery, just staring at the skybox the first time night came. I was just like, oh my god, that is so good looking. And you can really tell because, and I'm one of those people that's like nitpicky about games. I'm the guy that'll be like, oh, the game looks good, except over here there was like this one low-res texture that nobody will ever see.
Sure.
I haven't, that's not in here. The landscapes, they just look good. Like, I don't know what Mars looks like because I haven't been to Mars, but this is a pretty good representation, and I really liked it. I guess a couple things I wanted to talk about, though, was we'll get into the story mode in a few minutes, because that's one thing that, like, I sat on that menu like, if I wait, will it let me click something? But the thing that immediately struck me, and I want to talk to you about how this is from a game design standpoint, is the sense of loneliness. As soon as I got on my landing pad, I was like, crap, I'm the only one here, and I don't know exactly where to go or exactly what to do. And the game is pretty good in its current state about saying, hey, you go to this purple circle, but it's not hand-holdy at all.
Sure.
What has gone into, like, developing that sense of suspense? Is a lot of it like the not doing a hand-holdy tutorial, or I noticed you guys rely on audio cues a fair amount too?
Yeah, so I'm glad you said that, because I'm really big into creating that sense of atmosphere, just being alone on the surface of Mars, making sure that the perspective the player has is kind of one of openness, but also some sort of claustrophobia in a way, because you have this entire landscape to explore, but at the same time you're trapped inside this suit that is your only separation between life and death. So you can go wherever you want to go, but you also have to keep track of things like your oxygen and your battery and food supplies and water, and having these habitats that are kind of your oasis in the middle of this wasteland. So I think we've done a pretty good job of creating that feeling. But yeah, it's striking a balance for the difficulty of the game and trying to figure out, what is too difficult for exploration, and just allowing people to explore and kind of see what Mars would look like without being too overbearing in that regard.
And that kind of leads into my next one, because I had a situation where I was exploring. I was actually heading for a way station, and we got to it, and I activated it and everything. And chat's like, "Okay, keep exploring, keep exploring." And I'm like, "We're at 52% oxygen. It's time to go home."
Yeah.
How much did you guys have to play with that, the oxygen and battery depletion, to figure out this is a time frame that's good for the player to be out? Now, you can, of course, extend that by carrying the right, items with you in your inventory. But baseline, like, how hard was it to figure out, like, this is about the right amount of time to make this suspenseful the way we want it?
Well, to be honest, actually, we started from a point of accuracy. You'll notice in the game that the time scale is compressed a little bit. So the day is roughly, I think, about half an hour long. So a full day-night cycle, is about half an hour in game, where in real life it's actually really close to a 24-hour day on Mars. But then, so we tried to extrapolate how far would you be able to explore if the realistic oxygen supply was also compressed to that same time frame. But that, we're feeling as we go forward with early access that maybe we need to extend that a little bit, because that's one of the benefits of being an early access game, is that we can change these things based on player feedback. So I think we probably will relax those distances that you can travel a little bit. But yeah, I still really love that sense of having the habitat feel like the safe place that you have an ownership of and have to return to each day, because we also don't want to encourage players to be out exploring during the night, because that's actually pretty dangerous for an astronaut. So it's trying to strike a balance between realism and what's best for making a fun game.
Yeah, there's always that trade-off between realism and actual playability and fun. I'm glad you said that about the night, because I've played enough games over the years, and I was getting that realism sense from Lacuna Passage, and I love that. But I was very nervous the first time I went out at night, because I hadn't figured out yet if it was possible for me to puncture the suit or trip and tumble down a hill or something. And I was
right.
I needed to go out and look at a few things, and also I wanted to show everything to the stream. But I was really paranoid about being out there.
Right. Yeah. Yeah. I mean, that's one of the senses I think that you get just from the way we've structured the survival elements. Obviously, you didn't know that we currently don't have a way to have injuries, but as if we've put you in the role of an astronaut and you feel that way, then I think we've done a good job. So yeah, it's that's something I'm looking into including, absolutely, is injuries, suit punctures, things like that. And we'll also be doing more like event-based survival catastrophes, I guess you could say. So, things like a depressurization of the habitat. You saw that in the movie The Martian.
Yes.
And one of the things we already do have in the game is failing equipment. So you could have a fuse bust in one of your water reclaimers, and so you have to fix stuff like that, or you can go out and inspect things on a regular basis and ensure that they don't break down. So
I actually had that happen to me while I went out to explore. One day I came back and my water reclaimer had broken down because of a blown fuse.
Sure.
And one thing that was really cool to me was it wasn't as simple as me hovering over the object in game and it's saying, "Oh, do this." No, I had to go over to the control panel, look at the systems, download the manual to my iPad, I guess I could call it, your personal data pad. And
right.
I know you guys have an in-game name for it. I just can't remember it. I actually had to read and figure out this is what I need to do, and then I had to actually go do it. And it was a really cool, like, aha moments in learning just a little tiny fundamental basic of the way this game's world works, because that skill, that idea, carries over to all of your other systems.
Well, I'm really glad you said that, because that's definitely one of the things I was trying to accomplish with the mechanical repair system. I feel like there are so many games that when things go wrong, the game will basically just tell you exactly what went wrong and what you need to do to fix it. And I want part of the challenge of this game to be in understanding the systems and problem solving. So, I mean, again, we keep referencing it, but The Martian, consistently throughout that film and the book, one of the big things that Mark Watney has to do is work through the problem and figure out, okay, at what point in this chain of things I need to rely on did something break, or what can I do to repurpose some piece of equipment that was meant for some other purpose that could help me in my current situation.
I think that's one of the things that kind of appeals to me, is because I've played Conan and I've played Ark, and I have played a little bit of Rust. I don't like Rust, but so many other games devolve, like you said, into, well, this thing's broken, go here and press this button and everything will be fine. I like that you guys have taken that approach. We spoke a little bit about audio earlier, audio cues. I like the music as well. One of the hallmarks for me for music in games, and our station owner is going to laugh because I always give him a hard time about this series, but is Halo. Because Halo has great music, but you don't hear it that often. And when you hear music in Halo, you know something is about to happen.
Sure.
And I felt that way a little bit with Lacuna. It wasn't that some grandiose moment was going to happen, but the music would kick in and make me pay attention, and I would, notice the sun's coming up, the sun's going down, or something like that, or, it's not ever present, and I feel that it was effective just the same. Your composer is pretty good.
Thanks. Yeah, that's Clark Aboud. He's in Australia, and he does an amazing job. Yeah, we've really, I really wanted, even though there's no story content in the survival sandbox as it is right now, I did want there to be a cinematic feel to the things that you're doing. So when you discover a new habitat, when you come across a new supply cache, or even as you're just wandering around in the red wasteland, like having these musical cues that kind of lend a sense of importance to the things that you're doing, I really think that they've gone a long ways towards elevating the gameplay.
Yeah, I walked up to the edge of like a canyon, and there was this vista before me, and the music kind of swelled up right then. I was like, okay, that's perfect.
Nice.
I've always loved dynamic music. I feel that if it's done right, which it looks like you guys are doing a good job so far, it really adds a lot to a game. And music doesn't have to be there all the time. Let's talk a little bit about the story mode. The trailer for the game that shows the story mode is just amazing. You guys, let's see. You're gonna do? Is it gonna do full voice acting? I can't remember if you hit that Kickstarter stretch goal or not.
Yeah, depending on what we do for some of the characters, I mean, everything that would be audio will be voice acted. There'll be some elements of the story, obviously, that'll be told through, documents in your data pad or, text files. But yeah.
So talk to me a little bit about what the story is going to offer players outside of the sandbox.
Sure. So our sandbox mode is really that. I mean, a sandbox for developing all these mechanics that will be a part of the story mode. So the story mode covers the story of Jessica Rayner. She's one of the team that is the second manned mission to Mars, following up on the first manned mission to Mars that has basically gone MIA. So they she doesn't know what happened to this first team, but then her mission crash lands and she is the only survivor. So she's both fighting against the elements and with virtually none of the prepared supplies that her team would have landed with if they had a successful landing. But she also has this kind of secondary objective of trying to discover just what happened to that first crew.
I like it. It's always the first team going MIA too. Like,
yeah,
I never want to be part of the first team that goes anywhere. Nothing good
right.
happens to them. So, how long of a? I'm not going to dig any spoilers out of you, but how long of an experience are you guys looking for that?
It's tough to say at this point, but I'm shooting for having multiple different ways that you can discover the content. Mm-hmm. So there may be, depending on how we go about it, there may be multiple endings even. So you might have one option where you could completely bypass finding out what happens to the first crew, and you could focus entirely on setting up, getting communications reestablished with Earth, and waiting out until rescue. Or you could go entirely the sacrificial route of saying, like, okay, I'm going to devote most of my resources to seeing if anyone else survived and seeing if I can figure out what happened to them, just so I can record that and have that sent back to Earth. So there are multiple different ways. So I don't know if I could say exactly how long one player might get to the end, their end game content versus another. But yeah, I think that we'd probably be shooting for, like, at a minimum about 5 hours of a story mode.
Seems great to me. You guys describe it as a breadcrumb, a trail of breadcrumbs on the surface of Mars, and that to me is very cool, especially if I could kind of choose and say, oh, I want to devote my resources towards surviving, kind of, be a selfish jerk, or actually go find out what happened to these guys. And 25 square miles of open terrain around the crash site is... People hear numbers thrown around a lot. 25 doesn't sound big. 25 square miles of terrain is a big play space.
Yes, it is, yeah.
So, and I actually kind of found it kind of funny because when we were tweeting back and forth, you, me, and the Lone Samurai on Twitter the other day, I made a comment about the radiation poisoning. Mm-hmm. And you're like, oh, that's the edge of the map constraint. And I'm like, oh, I should have just turned around.
Yeah, that there are some, traditional gameplay shortcuts we have to take. Obviously, it's a little bit difficult to have instead of having like a invisible wall, we went with the radiation aspect to keep you within the gameplay area. But yeah, I mean, the majority of your objectives and things that will show up on your scanner will drive you in towards and keep you in the center of the map.
Awesome. What's funny is, and this is just the way my mind works, both times that I died from radiation poisoning, the sun was coming up, and I was directly out, with no shade or anything. I was like, is the rising sun just frying me? Like, am I like an ant under a magnifying glass right now? That's what I thought was happening. So I was going to go try it again at night, and then we had that conversation on Twitter.
Yeah, and it's funny you say that too, because actually one of our planned survival updates will be to include randomized radiation storms that would effectively do what you're saying. You'd be washed with, a solar flare of radiation from the sun. So you'd have, depending on what equipment you've got enabled, you either get a fair warning of when that's coming, or maybe you won't have any notice at all.
So the gameplay systems that we're seeing in the sandbox are things that Jessica is going to be using and taking advantage of in the main story.
Right.
One of the most interesting things to me is, in a lot of survival games, I'm thirsty, I drink water. I'm hungry, I eat a chunk of meat. That is not the case in Lacuna Passage. And I find the way that you guys have approached hunger and thirst to be really interesting, because if you open your data pad and look at your vitals, the game will tell you are dehydrated, but it will tell you lipids, and it'll tell you when you go to sleep how many calories you're going to burn. And you can't just eat one type of food and be okay.
Right.
I love that.
Yeah, I really wanted it to be as true to an astronaut's experience, especially an astronaut who's going through an unplanned survival experience, like when they have to ration their supplies. So one thing that I've noticed from several players in early access so far is that they've been very trained by other survival games where if their hunger meter hits 0, then they're going to die, and players are complaining, I can't find enough food. Well, in the game, when you run out of calories for the day, you're not just going to instantly die. It'll take you quite a while to pass away from hunger. So you'll have to watch your other survival stats, like you mentioned, things like lipids and other stats in your vitals app, to be able to gauge, okay, maybe if I don't have enough food to last me by eating 2,000 calories a day, maybe I need to ration them, so maybe I'll only eat 700 calories a day. And that'll keep you alive a lot longer.
Yeah, and it's important to note there's not a health bar that's going to tick down as you start to starve. In fact, I died on one expedition. I died by running out of oxygen a long time before I was going to die from anything related to hunger or thirst.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And I love the fact that that's in there. It's very unique, and it made me pay attention to the inventory. And when I found survival caches, it made me pay attention to what food I was picking up and made me make decisions based on, I probably don't need another canister that I could store some compressed oxygen in. I already have 3 of them kicking around back at the habitat. But
sure,
this pasta would be really nice because I just ate my last packet of pasta.
Yeah, and actually that decision making is something that I've really tried to put in a lot of the different aspects of the inventory. And so one thing that we haven't touched on just yet is the crafting and salvaging aspect, where a lot of the materials that you'll find as you're exploring in habitats and supply caches, they'll have material tags associated with them. And so some of these items can be used for multiple different things for crafting. So you might find a metallic solar cell that could be used as scrap metal or as a solar cell to build a solar panel. And so you have to make that decision. Like if you've only got the one metallic solar cell and you need to craft something that requires, scrap metal, you could scrap that metallic solar cell, but then you're out of a solar cell. So those are the kind of important decisions you'll have to make, is like not all of these crafting materials have only one use. You have multiple different things you could use them for, and so you'll have to really ration your supplies.
Yeah, and that adds, just another element of, I don't want to call it stress, but it is kind of stress. It's not real life stress, but it's definitely a stress of because you don't want your astronaut to die. Like even in survival, there's the survival sandbox. I got really attached to my little astronaut character. Like I did not want to die. I wanted to see how far I could push it, and there is, for just a early access game, and I'm just looking. I've looked through screenshots, and I haven't gotten nearly as far as I want to eventually. But there is so much stuff to craft.
Yeah, we really wanted to make it something where, for the habitats, they will support you for a decent amount of time, just with the supplies that you land with and that you find in them. But if you want to really stretch and hang out on Mars as long as possible, you're going to need to craft replacement supplies and equipment to repair your exterior life support modules.
Yeah, I've noticed that. It's probably one of my primary things that I do, and it's like I get a rhythm or a routine. I get up every morning and I walk out. I sleep till 5 Martian time in game. I get up and I go outside and I go all the way to the left because I'm at Habitat Alpha, and I check, going over. I check the electricity. I check the water reclaimer. I check the oxygen. And just methodically every single day, because if you come back to your habitat, which happened to me once at night, and it's the reason I'm so fanatical about this is I'd had a breakdown with my solar plant during the day while I was gone. Guess what didn't have any power? The habitat. That was not a good look, and that was not a fun night.
Yeah. There's so many things that you can manage, but if you're on top of it, you can really offset the eventual disrepair that will happen just by planning ahead and maintaining your equipment before it fails.
Yeah, and I like that that's in there. It's another kind of aspect of the attention to detail you guys are continuing to put into the atmosphere, because you could just let that stuff go, but you're going to be in a world of hurt when it breaks. But you also feel like
Yeah.
you're fighting an uphill battle because you're very aware that there are finite resources hanging around out there, even if it's a 25 square mile play space. There's only so much stuff out there.
Right. Yeah, and that's one of the things that over the course of early access, some of the first things that we'll be adding is a survival score of sorts that will allow you to gauge your progress on any particular run of the survival sandbox mode and compare it to your previous best, see ways that you can improve upon your runs, and then we'll also be adding in ways to extend your gameplay time by having supply drops that you can call in to add in additional supplies into the in-game ecosystem, I guess you could say.
Oh, that's cool. Now, I noticed this is a stretch goal, and I noticed that the game doesn't pop up in my VR section yet, but Oculus.
Yeah. Yeah, so VR is one of those big things that is changing so quickly that it's really difficult for a small team like ours to stay on top of it. So the way I'm approaching it right now is I want to get as many of the features in that we had planned for the game as possible, and always keeping in mind how they would potentially interface with VR.
Right.
And so that's always at the back of my mind, and there's always, especially with the way that we're doing the primary user interface in the game is the data pad, that is perfect for VR because it doesn't require any, overlays into empty space just floating in front of your character. It's a physical object in 3D space that's in front of your eyes. So that's one of the big things that I've kept in mind as we're developing to keep it compatible with the possibility of VR. And so I really do hope that we can make that happen. But of course, since the Kickstarter, the VR landscape is changing so quickly, so we'll have to see how that all works itself out. But yeah, I'd absolutely love to do that.
I think, and this is obviously a personal opinion of mine, but having an Oculus, I really think that this type of game is a great fit for VR. Because like I mentioned, I play Elite, and Elite's perfect for VR. Space is just great for that. And you also have the constraint here that you're in a helmet in this game. So,
Right.
certain aspects of VR will make sense with that. And as you said, the data pad's great. But I would love to experience this game in VR. It would be fantastic. But as somebody who's gone through the entire Kickstarter alpha beta cycle of Elite and remembering when they put in Oculus, I definitely think the way you're doing it's probably the best approach, because Frontier is a studio that has a lot of experience, and when they first put in Oculus support for it, all of us were like, oh my god, game's broken, what the heck.
Yeah, it's difficult. I mean, it's not as simple as hitting a button and saying add VR support. So there's a lot of considerations that I have to make, and as a small team, it definitely takes a strain on your development resources. But yeah, it's always in the back of my mind, and I absolutely can't wait to give it a try. So
yeah, I cannot wait to actually see it too. That's just going to be amazing. Now, I notice you listed I'll get to our viewer question in a second, but this I have to know. You listed as your inspiration on the Kickstarter 2001: A Space Odyssey. Totally get it. Obviously, The Martian. Dear Esther, I also totally get that. Pokemon Snap?
Yeah. So it sounds strange, and it might have been one of those slight little things we did to catch people's attention, but there is some truth to that, where a big part of the game is actually, at least what I hope people find interesting in the game, is the photography mode. So we have an in-game camera system that allows you to take really, really nice in-game photos without any HUD or anything. So you can kind of role play as a documentarian on Mars. And one of the really cool things with the photography system is that when you're taking photos, it's keeping track of the latitude and longitude of where you've taken the photo. And then when you go back and view your photos later, you can actually set waypoints to take you back to that location. And that kind of goes with what we were saying earlier about the game not holding your hand. And so many of the supply caches that you find, those are not going to just be automatically added to your map as little icons. You're going to have to keep track of where this stuff is. So taking a picture of it gives you a visual reference of what was at that spot, and then you can get back to it at any time by setting your waypoint on your datapad.
I thought it might be something like that. I took so many pictures when I was playing. I'm a sucker for screenshot functions. I always have been. I'm a huge
Yeah.
sucker for screenshot functions. I hadn't twigged to the fact that I could use them to take myself back to locations, though. You have just expanded my in-game world like 1,000-fold.
There you go.
That I don't know that I've ever really heard of anybody else doing an idea like that in the game either.
Well, and the other cool thing is that these are all photos that are being saved out to your computer's hard drive right when you take them. And so when you go into the main menu system, you can access the folder where the photos are being stored, and the file name that's saved out includes the latitude and longitude information, so you could share those photos with your friend and see if they can go find the same location.
Let me look at that real quick. Oh my god, I have 47 screenshots.
There you go.
I gotta tell you, I own a Nintendo Switch, and obviously Legend of Zelda. I've opened up my screenshots folder in that thing, and there must be 300 screenshots of Legend of Zelda in there.
Nice.
So
yeah, that's a great one.
Yeah, I'm just a screenshot junkie, but I love the fact that even something as simple as a screenshot, you guys have found a way to tie to the game world. That's very cool. So I guess we'll get to the viewer questions now. Some of them I'm just not even going to ask, because no, guys, we're not going to Pluto and we're not going to Neptune. This is a game about Mars. One of the best ones I have, though, came from one of our Discord chatters named Great Snowman, and I think it's particularly fitting considering our earlier conversation. Any plans to have the Mars rovers in there?
So, I don't want to spoil too much, but I mean, it's been in some of our screenshots. There are rovers you can find in the game world. They're currently inoperable, but that is something that I'm planning to do, is have drivable rovers. So you'll find little small scout rovers that you can discover. I think one of them is modeled roughly on an existing rover that has already been to Mars. But then there are the full-scale pressurized roving transports that you could potentially drive in a later update.
Yeah, I've seen a screenshot of those, actually. They look cool. Does that mean that if I look hard enough, I might find, opportunity sitting around somewhere?
It's not out of the question.
I think that would be very cool. I love scientific nods like that. I know I've brought it back to Elite a couple times, but one of my favorite Easter eggs ever in Elite is that Voyager 3 is in the game, and you can fly up to it, and you can see the golden record on it.
Yeah, that's awesome. And there are a few little Easter eggs like that, and I'll point out one right now, actually. In the habitats, if you look at the pattern on the paneling on the floors, that's actually taken straight from the the spaceship that was used in 2001: A Space Odyssey. So
I knew that looked familiar. I could not put my finger on it. It's like, I've seen this before.
Yep.
That's very cool. Easter eggs, one of my favorite things in games. So, how much longer before I could play the story mode? I think that's my most pressing question out of everything.
Yeah, it's one of those things where I was really looking forward to getting this up on early access, because the biggest thing throughout this process has been getting feedback first from our Kickstarter backers and now from everyone on early access. So I am going to make myself very open-ended in terms of responding to player feedback and working on what they want me to work on. So I think the first 6 months or so are going to be entirely devoted to expanding on the gameplay mechanics of the survival sandbox mode. And then it just comes down to what player, what they want me to be working on, I guess, from then on out. So, yeah, I can't give you any real good answer on that, but yeah, I'd hope that before too long you'd be able to get your hands on that.
Nice. I've looked through this discussion on Steam a few times, and a lot of times when you look at early access discussion boards on Steam, it's just a hate fest, and I really don't see that in this game, and that's got to be encouraging for you guys.
Yeah, it's the response has been really good from players so far. I think the people that are playing it are getting what we're trying to do. You'll always have people who want you to throw literally everything in there and make it turn into Minecraft on Mars. But we know what we want to do, and I think we're getting some great feedback from players. And so I'm really looking forward to the next few months and continuing to update.
I've talked to a lot of devs, and I've noticed that you guys are using Unity, and from what I know, that's going to make it pretty easy for you guys to iterate. How's the experience been with having to patch through Steam and just using the Unity engine so far?
It's funny because we released another project a couple years ago called Timeframe, and that went up on Steam, not into early access, but just as a full release, and that really gave us some perspective on how the Steam ecosystem works. And so we've had some experience in that regard, and I'm really loving the early access platform and how easy Valve has made it to push out updates and communicate with people who are playing the game. I basically created a full automated setup for uploading new builds, and so you might have noticed just even in the first 2 days of the game being on Steam, I've already pushed out 2 updates. So it's really simple. I can fix something, hit a button, and it goes straight up to the servers, and then I just hit another button to set it live. So yeah, it's great. I love this process, and I can't wait to get working on some more fixes that people have been asking for.
Nice. I had no idea that Timeframe was you guys. I have a friend who loves that game.
Oh, great. Thanks.
So, yeah, I guess I missed that one in my research, but yeah, that kind of meshes with a lot of what I've heard from devs is that just Steam these days is getting a little better. I know Greenlight was a nightmare for a while.
Yeah.
We had a few guys that we talked to that came through Greenlight, and it was like, wow, it's terrible. Don't do it.
Yeah,
So,
well, they're opening that wide open now. So for those of us who've gotten through prior to this, it was a little easier maybe. But yeah, it's going to be a tough marketplace after all this.
I think it is. Well, I guess we'll kind of wrap it up a little bit. I got to say, I'm really excited to see you guys, finish this game up and keep moving forward. I know I'm going to keep playing it. It was really engaging for my stream, and I think in today's ecosystem, for us content creators, that's a huge deal. But also for you guys, it's great because it means that there's that exposure.
Yeah.
But I'm just looking forward to it. So I guess, what's one last thing you'd like to tell everybody that's watching about Lacuna Passage, or give us a logline pitch again, whatever you want to do.
Sure, I'll give this opportunity. I'll plug our next big update that we're planning. So I haven't really written about it much in the forums yet, but I think our first big update is going to be sandstorms. So if you're interested in kind of what kinds of things could go wrong on Mars, that's a big one. And so you're going to be encountering full-on zero visibility dust storms and having to map out their trajectory across the map, and maybe trying to avoid them by moving your camp to a different habitat that's out of the way of the storm. If you're in the middle of the storm, your navigation will go out. So all kinds of really cool survival events that we're planning like that.
Oh, God. Tyler, I got to say, I'm looking forward to that, and I'm also simultaneously dreading that.
Yeah.
Oh, man. Well, I'd look forward to it, seriously, though. Thank you so much for joining us. I cannot wait to share more of this game with basically everybody. So if you follow me on Twitter, I'm probably going to flood you with stuff about Lacuna Passage, which is
no
just
problem.
Means that you should go buy the game, guys. It's in early access right now. In fact, I believe that you guys, what is the price for Lacuna right now? It's $14.99. I'll tell you guys right now that I've already gotten well over $14.99 out of it, and I can't even play the main mode of the game yet.
Awesome.
So yeah, absolutely go buy it. Tyler, thank you for joining me, man.
Yeah, thank you for having me.
Hey guys, thanks for watching. Make sure you check out some of these other videos from Sanitarium.FM and follow us on Facebook and Twitter. The information is right below that big shiny subscribe button.